2:14 a.m. The NICU hums with the sound of machines keeping tiny lives tethered to this world. Ventilators breathing for lungs too small to remember how. Heart monitors counting beats that flutter like hummingbird wings. Rebecca sits beside an incubator that contains everything she has ever loved. Her daughter Sophia, born at 26 weeks, weighs less than a bag of flour. Translucent skin stretched over bird bones. Eyes still fused shut against a world she wasn't supposed to see for 3 more months. The nurses speak in Chispus, but Rebecca hears everything. Critical next 48 hours. Underdeveloped lungs. Pray for the best. Prepare for... She can't finish that sentence, not even in her mind. You've been here, haven't you? Maybe not in a NICU, but in that place where words become useless. Where every prayer you've ever learned feels like speaking a foreign language to an empty sky. Rebecca tries to pray, really tries. She forms words about healing, about miracles, about God's plan, but they evaporate before reaching her lips, dissolving in the antiseptic air like sugar in rain. What comes instead are tears, silent, unstoppable. A language she didn't know, she spoke fluently. At 2:47 a.m., something shifts. Not in Sophia's monitors, those numbers remain stubbornly fragile. But something in Rebecca breaks open, like soil after long drought, finally receiving rain. She stops trying to find words, stops searching for the right prayer, the perfect verse, the faith formula that might tip the cosmic scales in her daughter's favor. Instead, she places her finger against the incubator's plastic wall, right where Sophia's impossibly tiny hand rests, and she weeps. Not the controlled tears of appropriate grief, not the manageable sorrow of expected emotions, but the primal wailing of a mother whose child hangs between worlds, whose love is too big for her body to contain. In the Psalms, David writes, "You have kept count of my tossings, put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book?" The ancient Hebrew suggests something startling, that God doesn't just notice our tears. He collects them, stores them, treasures them like precious wine. As if our breaking isn't a nuisance to be managed, but a communication to be received, a language that speaks directly to the heart of the divine without needing translation. Dr. Martinez finds Rebecca there at dawn, still weeping, still pressed against that plastic barrier. As the lead neonatologist, he's delivered countless pronouncements about survival rates and lung development. But this morning, he sits beside her and says nothing. Not because he lacks medical updates. Sophia's night was stable, encouraging even. But because he recognizes sacred ground when he sees it. "I don't know how to pray anymore," Rebecca whispers, without looking away from her daughter. Dr. Martinez nods. After 20 years in the NICU, he's learned that the deepest prayers often have no words. "Maybe," he says gently, "this is how you pray now." Jesus wept. 2 words, the shortest verse in the entire Bible, and perhaps the most radical. Because this wasn't strategic weeping. Christ knew he was about to raise Lazarus from the dead. He knew the story's ending. Yet when he saw Mary and Martha's grief, when he witnessed their breaking, He entered their tears as if they were his own. He didn't comfort them with spoilers about the miracle coming. He didn't say, "Don't cry, he'll be alive in 5 minutes." He wept with them in their present pain, in their current darkness, as if their tears mattered more than his foreknowledge. There's a tradition in some monasteries of the ministry of tears. Monks who understand that certain depths of prayer can only be reached through weeping. Not depression, not despair, but a breaking open that creates space for God to enter places that words could never touch. They call it the gift of tears, as if weeping were not failure of faith, but evidence of it, as if our breaking were not distance from God, but proximity to Him. On Sophia's 10th day in the NICU, something extraordinary happens. Not a miracle in the sense Rebecca had imagined. Sophia's recovery is slow, measured in millimeters of growth and decimal points of stability. But during her morning vigil, as Rebecca weeps her wordless prayers, Sophia's eyes open for the first time. They don't focus, can't track movement, but for 37 seconds, mother and daughter look at each other across the expanse of plastic and possibility. Rebecca doesn't speak, doesn't whisper reassurances or make promises about the future. She just cries, tears of terror and love and desperate hope streaming down her face. And somehow, in that moment, she knows her daughter is receiving something more essential than words, something that bypasses language entirely and goes straight to the core of what it means to be held, to be seen, to be loved without condition. Sophia comes home after 83 days, healthy, thriving, a walking testament to medical advances and parental persistence, and whatever mysterious forces govern the difference between barely breathing and fully alive. But when people ask Rebecca about those months, she doesn't talk about the medical interventions or the statistical miracles. She talks about learning a new language. "I used to think prayer was about asking for things," she tells her sister months later, about finding the right words to convince God to change His mind. But in that NICU, I learned that sometimes prayer is just being present to reality, being broken open by love that's too big for your heart to hold. The tears weren't a failure of faith. They were faith speaking its native tongue. There's a reason grief and worship have always been neighbors in the human experience, a reason that every honest spiritual tradition makes space for lament, for questioning, for the kind of tears that come when love meets limitation. Because some truths are too large for language. Some love too deep for words. Some prayers too honest for polite syllables. In those moments, tears become our mother tongue. The first language we spoke when we entered this world, gasping and naked and utterly dependent. The last language that remains when everything else fails us. Tonight, maybe you are sitting in your own NICU, your own 2 a.m. vigil beside something precious and fragile that hangs between life and death, hope and despair, holding on and letting go. Maybe you've run out of words, exhausted your vocabulary of requests and bargains and theological explanations. Maybe you're down to just tears and breath and the stubborn refusal to leave love's bedside. You haven't lost your faith. You've found its deepest expression. Because the God who wept beside Lazarus's tomb understands the language you're speaking. The God who bottles your tears recognizes the prayer you can't articulate. In the silence between your sobs, something is being born. In the space between your words, love is learning your accent. In the depth of your breaking, grace is taking notes. Your tears aren't falling into emptiness. They're falling into hands that have been cupped to catch them since before you knew you needed to cry. The language of 2 a.m. tears. It's not the failure of prayer. It's prayer coming home.